In today's episode, we're about to explore the dumbest ways people got mauled by animals, from a man who tried to tame a wild wolf to a tourist who climbed into a lion enclosure. It was November 12th, 2014, and the first snow of winter dusted the remote forest on federally managed land bordering Yellowstone National Park, just outside the park's protected boundaries, as 32-year-old Brandon Kellerman set up his elaborate bait system in a clearing 2 miles from the nearest trail. Brandon had become obsessed with wolves after watching nature documentaries and reading books about wolf behavior. His apartment in Seattle was filled with wolf memorabilia, training manuals, and equipment he'd purchased online. He'd spent thousands of dollars on heavy-duty cages, tranquilizer equipment he'd obtained through questionable channels, and what he believed were humane snares. Brandon had convinced himself that wolves were simply misunderstood dogs that needed the right handler. His plan was simple: lure a young wolf with bait, use his tranquilizer equipment to sedate it, transport it to a secure location he'd prepared on rented property, and spend months gaining its trust through feeding and positive reinforcement. Gray wolves are apex predators, with adult males typically weighing between 100 and 130 pounds, though some individuals can reach slightly higher weights. These highly intelligent pack animals possess powerful jaws capable of crushing bone and inflicting deep puncture wounds, making any close encounter with humans potentially lethal, despite their natural tendency to avoid people. Wolves are territorial and defensive of their pack and territory, capable of inflicting serious injuries when they feel threatened or cornered. While wolves generally avoid humans and fatal attacks are extremely rare, attempting to trap or handle wild wolves without proper authorization is both illegal and can trigger defensive aggression. Brandon had set up what he believed was an effective bait station with raw meat, positioning himself in a camouflaged blind about 50 yards away where he could monitor the area and prepare his tranquilizer equipment. What Brandon didn't understand was that wolves in this area traveled in packs, and that his bait would attract multiple animals, not the single young wolf he'd hoped to capture. A pack of 6 wolves approached the clearing just before dusk, drawn by the scent of the bait Brandon had placed. The alpha male, a 120-pound gray wolf, immediately recognized the artificial nature of the bait setup and circled the area cautiously. The moment Brandon stepped into the open, the alpha male spotted him. The wolf's posture changed instantly from cautious to defensive, its ears flattening and lips pulling back to reveal massive canines. The pack began displaying agitated behavior, circling and vocalizing as they assessed this unexpected human threat. Realizing the situation he is in, he reached for the bear spray on his belt, but his hands were shaking so badly he fumbled with the safety clip. The alpha male launched a warning rush toward Brandon, closing half the distance in explosive bursts before stopping and retreating, attempting to drive the human away. Brandon panicked and turned to run, his sudden flight triggering a more aggressive defensive response. The alpha charged again in a rapid defensive rush. The alpha wolf struck Brandon's leg and lower back area with a quick defensive bite before immediately releasing and backing away. The force of the encounter and Brandon's panicked stumbling caused him to trip and fall hard against a partially buried rock, resulting in severe head trauma and cervical spine injury from the impact. The entire pack had disengaged and moved away from the clearing within seconds, their defensive behavior satisfied once the perceived threat was incapacitated. The encounter itself had lasted less than 10 seconds, but Brandon's injuries from the fall were catastrophic. Brandon lay bleeding in the snow, unable to move due to the spinal injury from his fall. The combination of traumatic head injury, cervical spine damage, and the rapidly dropping temperatures created a fatal situation. He remained conscious for several minutes before losing consciousness from shock and hypothermia. Brandon had told no one his exact location, parking his vehicle at a remote turnout miles from any main road, and an unexpected early blizzard that night made search efforts impossible until weather cleared. He was discovered 4 days later by county search and rescue personnel who had been alerted by his abandoned vehicle. The investigation revealed Brandon's illegal equipment and his detailed journals outlining his plan to capture and tame a wild wolf. Wildlife officials emphasized that wolves are protected species and that attempting to trap or domesticate them is a federal crime. The medical examiner determined that Brandon had died primarily from traumatic head and spinal injuries sustained in the fall, with hypothermia significantly contributing to his death. Brandon's death was ruled as the result of his own illegal and reckless actions. It was January 9th, 2016, just after midnight, on a narrow, unlit road outside Broken Hill, New South Wales, where the desert night pressed close and the faint rustle of nocturnal wildlife went largely unnoticed by a man about to experience sudden, fatal violence. Troy Maddox, 31, worked as a machinery operator at a local quarry and was known among peers for loud bravado, often boasting about strength and daring acts at the pub after long shifts. He had grown up on the outskirts of the outback and had familiarity with wildlife, enough to believe he understood animal behavior, but not enough to recognize the limits of control. Maddox drank heavily, especially in groups, and was prone to escalating dares to maintain his reputation as fearless. On this night, after a few hours at the pub, his motivation was simple: to entertain his friends and assert dominance over something outside human authority. He arrived at the road with 3 friends, walking along gravel and dust under a half-moon. Maddox's attention was caught by a large red male kangaroo feeding near a fence line. His friends said that Maddox mentioned wanting to provoke a reaction he could film, mock, and later recount. He stripped his shoes off, removed his hat, told them to film, and began squaring up to the animal. The environment itself contributed to the risk. Adult male red kangaroos can stand 6 feet tall and weigh up to 180 pounds, with powerful hind legs capable of delivering strikes that can fracture bones, tear muscles, and cause severe internal injury. They use a thick, muscular tail for balance when striking, and their long claws can inflict lacerations. While generally non-aggressive, they react violently when cornered, threatened, or approached too closely, especially at night when feeding. These defensive behaviors are instinctual, fast, and precise. The kangaroo stopped feeding as he approached, ears flattened and chest pumping with fast, shallow breaths. Its movements sharpened, stepping laterally to keep him in view while drifting closer to the fence, limiting its own escape. Maddox noticed the tension and mistook it for submission, puffing out his chest and advancing anyway. His friends clustered behind him, laughing and filming, waving him closer and gesturing for him to provoke it further. The animal's posture had shifted fully to threat, hind legs coiled, head low, eyes locked. But the encouragement only emboldened him. Maddox closed the gap to less than 10 feet, throwing mock punches and bouncing on his toes, ignoring every warning signal as the kangaroo's balance settled into a fighting stance. The tension escalated as he stepped closer. The kangaroo leaned back onto its tail, legs coiled beneath it, preparing a double kick. Maddox's stance was upright, hands raised, but the animal's speed and power were beyond human anticipation. The first contact was instantaneous, both hind feet striking his lower abdomen simultaneously. The force caused deep lacerations and severely damaging internal organs. Maddox collapsed backward, knees hitting the ground first, hands pressing ineffectively at the wound. Blood pooled rapidly, running along the road's slight slope. The strike had ruptured internal tissue and caused massive internal hemorrhage, leaving the victim helpless. The smell of blood was sharp, metallic, and immediate. He gasped briefly, high-pitched, before the sound faltered into a wet, choking rasp. The kangaroo, still balanced on its tail, delivered a single additional kick to the upper torso, glancing against the ribs and causing additional bruising and minor lacerations before bounding away along the fence line. Within seconds, it disappeared into scrub, leaving a still, bloodied figure in its wake. Maddox's friends scrambled, one dialing emergency services immediately. Another attempted to cover the wound with a shirt, but hands slipped constantly in the pooling blood. He remained conscious for no more than 3 minutes before collapsing completely. Emergency responders arrived 11 minutes after the call. Paramedics noted catastrophic abdominal trauma, no detectable pulse, and pronounced Maddox dead at the scene. There was no feasible intervention without immediate surgical facilities, and the extent of internal and external injury confirmed the outcome. A coroner report later summarized the death as massive abdominal trauma with complete rupture of abdominal muscles, internal lacerations to multiple organs, and hemorrhagic shock, emphasizing rapid fatality. The report confirmed injuries were consistent with the force and mechanics of large hind leg strikes from an adult male red kangaroo. Police documented the scene, briefly closing the road and photographing the remains. The friend's footage was voluntarily deleted at the request of Maddox's family, and no copies remained in circulation. Authorities classified the incident as an alcohol-related wildlife interaction, noting that no action was warranted against the animal, which had not exhibited predatory intent but purely defensive behavior. Maddox's family arranged a quiet funeral. There was no public memorial or media spectacle. The kangaroo remained in its natural territory, undisturbed except by routine observation, a reminder of the lethal efficiency of wildlife when provoked by human overconfidence. It was May 28, 2015, and the Florida Everglades shimmered under the intense subtropical sun, a vast wilderness of sawgrass marsh and cypress swamps that stretched endlessly toward the horizon. The Anhinga Trail in Everglades National Park was bustling with tourists eager to photograph the abundant wildlife, but warning signs lined every boardwalk and viewing area, reminding visitors of the very real dangers lurking in the murky waters below. The air was thick with humidity and the buzz of insects, while the occasional splash of an alligator served as constant reminders that this was untamed wilderness. Madison Taylor had driven down from Orlando specifically to create content for her struggling social media accounts. At 26, she was a part-time retail worker who dreamed of becoming a full-time influencer, but her modest following of 3,000 Instagram followers wasn't generating the income or opportunities she desperately wanted. She had been posting increasingly dangerous stunts and provocative content, but nothing had gone viral, and her engagement rates remained disappointingly low. Madison's posts had grown more desperate and attention-seeking over the past few months. She had filmed herself trespassing in abandoned buildings, posing on highway overpasses, and getting uncomfortably close to various animals at petting zoos and wildlife parks. Each risky post was accompanied by hashtags like #NoFear and #DoItForTheGram, but the likes and comments never reached the levels she needed to monetize her content. American alligators are apex predators that have remained virtually unchanged for millions of years, perfectly adapted for their role as ambush hunters in aquatic environments. Adult males can reach lengths of 14 feet and weights exceeding 1,000 pounds, with jaw muscles capable of exerting over 3,000 pounds of pressure per square inch. Despite their reputation for being sluggish, alligators can move with explosive speed when attacking, launching themselves out of water or across land at speeds up to 35 miles per hour. Their powerful tails can break bones, and their death roll technique is designed to disorient and drown prey while tearing flesh from bone. That afternoon, Madison had spotted what she considered the perfect opportunity for viral content: a massive male alligator sunning himself on a muddy bank just off the main boardwalk. The 12-foot, 500-pound reptile appeared motionless in the heat, his prehistoric form creating an impressive backdrop for the kind of dramatic content Madison believed would finally make her famous. Madison left the designated viewing area and approached the water's edge, planning to get close enough to touch the alligator's tail while filming herself. She had researched alligator behavior online and convinced herself that they were too sluggish in the heat to pose any real threat. She waded into the shallow water, phone extended to capture her approach to the massive reptile. The moment Madison's hand made contact with the alligator's tail, the massive reptile exploded into motion with shocking speed. The 500-pound predator spun around faster than Madison could react, its powerful jaws snapping shut on her extended arm with bone-crushing force. The alligator's teeth, designed for gripping rather than cutting, punctured through Madison's forearm and locked in place with hydraulic pressure. The alligator immediately began its signature death roll, spinning rapidly in the water while maintaining its grip on Madison's arm. The violent rotation dislocated her shoulder and fractured her arm bones, while the centrifugal force made it impossible for her to maintain her footing or resist the predator's movements. Madison's screams echoed across the marsh as she was dragged deeper into the murky water. The death roll continued for nearly 30 seconds, each rotation causing additional trauma to Madison's arm and shoulder while simultaneously disorienting her and filling her lungs with swamp water. The alligator's powerful tail thrashed violently, striking Madison's torso and legs with enough force to crack ribs and cause internal bleeding. The alligator's jaws worked like a vice, the crushing pressure fracturing bones and severing arteries in Madison's arm. Blood poured from the puncture wounds, attracting other alligators in the area, while weakening Madison through rapid blood loss. The predator's continued rolling motion drove her underwater repeatedly, filling her lungs with contaminated swamp water and making breathing increasingly difficult. Madison's struggles grew weaker as blood loss and drowning combined to overwhelm her system. Within minutes, Madison's movements ceased as the massive predator's assault proved unsurvivable. Other tourists on the boardwalk had witnessed the entire attack, their screams and shouts attracting park rangers who arrived within minutes. Madison's body was recovered several hours later by specialized wildlife officers using boats and protective equipment. The aggressive male alligator was captured and euthanized, as it had demonstrated dangerous behavior toward humans. Madison's death sparked widespread discussion about the dangerous lengths people would go to for social media fame. Her final video, recovered from her waterlogged phone, showed her approach to the alligator and captured the beginning of the attack. It was April 17, 2018, at a primate sanctuary in East Africa, where rescued chimpanzees lived in large enclosures designed to provide natural habitat while ensuring visitor safety. The sanctuary operated a double barrier system with a restricted buffer zone between the public walkway and primary enclosure, clearly marked with warning signs. The facility housed several troops in spacious compounds surrounded by reinforced fencing. A compromised section in the primary barrier had developed a hand-width gap that maintenance crews had not yet repaired. Jenna Carlisle, a 26-year-old environmental science graduate, had arrived as part of an educational tour focusing on primate conservation. She was accompanied by a 22-year-old student volunteer assigned to remind visitors about buffer zones and safety protocols. Their guide, a 47-year-old eco-tour specialist known for following procedures strictly, was leading another group through a different section when the incident occurred. A vigilant 35-year-old security guard was conducting perimeter patrol from the gatehouse, unaware that a visitor had breached the secondary barrier. The troop Jenna encountered consisted of 7 adult chimpanzees, including several large males and females who had shown increasing agitation as visitors gathered near their enclosure. These chimpanzees had been rescued from traumatic situations and retained heightened defensive behaviors around humans. The afternoon feeding schedule had been delayed, adding to their restlessness. The gap in the primary fencing had been created by repeated pressure from the chimps testing the barrier. Chimpanzees are among the most powerful primates on Earth, with adult males possessing strength 5 to 7 times greater than humans. These intelligent animals weigh up to 150 pounds and stand over 4 feet tall, with incredibly long arms that provide exceptional reach and leverage. Their hands are equipped with opposable thumbs and fingers capable of exerting crushing grip strength, while their canine teeth can grow up to 2 inches long. Chimpanzees are highly social animals that coordinate attacks when threatened, with multiple individuals working together to overwhelm perceived threats. The attack began when Jenna climbed the secondary fence to retrieve a dropped personal item in the restricted buffer zone. Her movement immediately triggered aggressive responses from the entire troop, who gathered at the primary fence line with escalating agitation as she approached the compromised barrier section. The first contact came when the largest male chimp seized Jenna's sleeve through the gap, using his powerful grip to pull her arm against the mesh. Within seconds, other troop members joined the assault. A second chimp grabbed her hair, while a third latched onto her other arm, creating multiple control points that prevented escape. The coordinated attack intensified as more chimpanzees reached through the gap to grasp clothing and exposed skin. Their powerful hands tore at fabric and flesh, while long fingers found purchase on her limbs and torso. The chimps pulled her tighter against the fence, bringing more of her body within reach of their grasping hands and snapping teeth. The troops' assault focused on typical chimpanzee target areas, with multiple animals biting at her hands, face, and arms simultaneously. Their 2-inch canine teeth punctured skin and muscle, creating deep wounds that bled profusely. The chimp's incredible grip strength crushed bones in her hands and fingers, while coordinated pulling motions caused severe tissue damage across her upper body. As the attack continued, the chimpanzees maintained their holds while delivering repeated bites and strikes. Their intelligence allowed them to coordinate the assault, with some animals holding her in position while others inflicted damage. Multiple bite wounds severed major blood vessels in her arms and neck, causing rapid blood loss that quickly led to shock. The sustained attack, with 7 adult chimpanzees participating simultaneously, created massive trauma across multiple body systems. Deep puncture wounds from canine teeth damaged vital structures, while powerful hands crushed bones and tore soft tissue. The combination of multiple arterial injuries and severe tissue destruction caused catastrophic blood loss. The assault continued for several minutes until security personnel arrived and used noisemakers and water hoses to drive the troop away from the fence. By the time they could safely extract Jenna from the barrier, she had lost consciousness from severe blood loss and trauma. Emergency responders transported Jenna to the nearest medical facility, but the extent of her injuries proved fatal. The combination of multiple arterial damage, severe tissue destruction, and massive blood loss had caused irreversible shock and organ failure. She was pronounced dead shortly after arrival, despite aggressive resuscitation efforts. The incident prompted an immediate investigation by local authorities and international primate welfare organizations, focusing on barrier maintenance and visitor safety protocols. The compromised fencing section was immediately repaired and additional security measures implemented. Jenna's family released a statement supporting the sanctuary's conservation mission while calling for enhanced safety standards. Jenna Carlisle's story demonstrated how even well-intentioned conservation facilities can become deadly when safety barriers fail and intelligent and coordinated attackers coordinate attacks. It was September 26, 2017, and the first hard freeze of autumn had locked Alaska's North Slope into frozen mud and ice-crusted gravel. The vast coastal plain stretching south from the Beaufort Sea supported a network of oil extraction operations connected by elevated pipelines and gravel roads. A small subcontractor support camp sat along a service road approximately 18 miles from the nearest major facility. The camp consisted of a cluster of modular sleeping units, a mess trailer, a maintenance bay, and several rows of shipping containers housing tools and replacement parts. Unlike the larger company-operated facilities, which maintained dedicated wildlife monitors, electric perimeter fencing, and strict food waste protocols, the subcontractor camp operated under reduced oversight. A chain-link perimeter fence, partially damaged by vehicle traffic and weather, enclosed the main living and working areas, but left gaps near the container storage rows on the camp's southern edge. Brogan Tarlick was a 38-year-old contract heavy equipment mechanic from Fairbanks who had worked North Slope rotations for 7 years. Tarlick was familiar with polar bear safety protocols, though the subcontractor's enforcement had been inconsistent. Camp records showed that food waste from the mess trailer had been deposited in unsecured dumpsters near the container rows on at least 5 occasions during the previous 2 weeks, in violation of regional wildlife regulations. A security camera mounted on the mess trailer had captured footage on 3 separate nights of a large polar bear investigating the dumpsters, pulling at lids and circling the container rows before retreating toward the coast. The camp supervisor had reported the sightings to the primary contractor, but had not restricted access to the container area or secured the waste receptacles at the time of the incident. Tarlick began his shift before sunrise, walking from his sleeping unit toward the maintenance bay, along a route that passed between 2 rows of shipping containers. The narrow corridor between the container rows was was unlit, with visibility limited to the ambient glow from the mess trailer's exterior light, approximately 60 meters away. The containers created blind corners at each intersection, with no sight line extending more than 20 feet in any direction. Polar bears that become food conditioned through repeated access to human waste undergo a behavioral shift that makes them exceptionally dangerous. Unlike bears that encounter humans unexpectedly, food-conditioned bears associate human infrastructure and human scent with caloric reward. Over repeated exposures, wariness of humans diminishes until close-range encounters become inevitable. A food-conditioned adult male encountering a human at close range in a confined space is more likely to approach closely and respond with predatory behavior rather than retreat. Tracks in frost and wind-packed snow indicated the bear had entered the camp through the damaged southern fence section and had been moving between the containers for some time before the encounter. The tracks showed a pattern of movement consistent with an animal familiar with the camp's layout, circling the dumpster area before moving deeper between the container rows. A co-worker in the maintenance bay heard a single shout at approximately 5:50 a.m., followed by the sound of something heavy striking a metal container. He grabbed a spotlight and moved toward the container rows, where he found Tarlik on the ground between containers. The bear was still present, approximately 30 feet away at the end of the row, its massive frame blocking the narrow corridor. The co-worker retreated immediately and radioed for emergency assistance, firing one of the camp's flare guns from the maintenance bay doorway. The bear moved off through the fence gap and disappeared toward the coast. Emergency responders from the nearest facility arrived within 40 minutes. Brogan Tarlik was confirmed dead at the scene. Injuries were concentrated on the head, neck, and upper body, consistent with a predatory attack. The investigation cited the unsecured food waste, the damaged perimeter fence, repeated documented bear activity that had not been acted upon, and the absence of lighting in the container corridor as contributing factors. The subcontractor was fined, and the camp was shut down for an extended safety review. The bear was located during coordinated aerial search operations and destroyed 4 days later under Federal Wildlife Authority authorization, and a necropsy confirmed the animal was an adult male in fair to poor body condition. It was March 8, 2015, and the late afternoon sun beat down on the remote property outside Cuiabá, Mato Grosso, where a rotting wooden shed stood surrounded by dense scrubland. Inside, beneath the warped floorboards that creaked with every step, lived a massive Bushmaster that an old farmer insisted was harmless to him. Odorico Feitosa was a 67-year-old retired farmer who had spent his entire life in the Mato Grosso region. His weathered hands and sun-darkened skin told the story of decades working the land, and his neighbors knew him as much for his competence as for his increasingly eccentric relationship with wildlife. Over the past year, Odorico had been feeding scraps and occasional dead rats to what he claimed was a single Bushmaster snake living beneath his tool shed. He spoke of the serpent with proprietary affection, referring to it as his snake, describing how it had grown fat and lazy under his care. What made this dangerous obsession more troubling was Odorico's deep distrust of modern medicine. He had never visited a hospital in his adult life, believing that natural toughness and his body's resilience were superior to doctors and their interventions. That same stubbornness would prove fatal when his son-in-law, Marco, drove 3 hours that March day to help prepare the property for sale. Bushmasters are among the largest venomous snakes in the Americas, reaching lengths of up to 10 feet and weighing over 11 pounds. Their hemotoxic venom is among the most potent of any viper, designed to destroy blood cells and tissue. When threatened, Bushmasters strike with remarkable speed and may deliver multiple bites in rapid succession. Marco arrived mid-afternoon. Odorico led Marco to the shed, explaining his intention to relocate the snake before potential buyers toured the property. The interior smelled of rot and stored animal feed. Bags of grain stacked against walls filmed with dust. Rats scattered across the rafters as the door swung open. Odorico crouched near the center of the floor where several boards sat loose, their edges splintered. He worked his fingers beneath them, prying them up with his bare hands. The Bushmaster lay coiled in the dim space beneath the floorboards, easily 7 feet long and thick as a man's forearm. Its patterned scales were barely visible in the shadows created by the stored feed bags. Odorico reached down, perhaps intending to demonstrate his claimed rapport with the creature, when the snake's head snapped forward twice in rapid succession, fangs penetrating deep into his exposed forearm just below the elbow. The strikes happened too fast for Odorico to react. He jerked backward in surprise. Upon realizing what happened, Marco moved to help his father-in-law stand and wrapped a cloth loosely around his forearm to slow movement while attempting to call emergency services. Odorico waved him off repeatedly, insisting everything was fine. The older man refused water when Marco retrieved a bottle from the truck. Within 20 to 30 minutes, swelling had spread past Odorico's elbow, and dark bruising and patchy discoloration appeared around the bite and along the forearm. His fingers began to swell noticeably, the skin taut and shiny. Marco's assistants transformed into urgent pleas for Odorico to let him call an ambulance. He shook his head, even managing a laugh, maintaining his lifelong stance against hospitals. Marco begged him to reconsider, describing how his color was draining and how his lips had taken on a grayish tint. But Odorico's stubbornness held firm, even as his strength visibly ebbed. Over the next 4 hours, Odorico remained on the floor of the shed, his back propped against a support beam. The swelling continued spreading up his arm and across his chest. His speech became increasingly slurred, words running together as the venom's effects on his cardiovascular system intensified. Blood began seeping from his nose and the corners of his mouth, signs that his blood had lost its ability to clot properly. His breathing grew shallow and labored. Marco stayed beside him the entire time. By early evening, Odorico had stopped responding to questions. His eyes remained half open, but unfocused. His chest continued to rise and fall in irregular intervals. Just after 8 o'clock, roughly 4.5 hours after the bite, his breathing stopped entirely. Marco finally called emergency services, but it was far too late. The coroner's report, issued 3 days later, listed the cause of death as envenomation, resulting in cardiovascular collapse and internal hemorrhaging. Odorico's body remained in the shed until authorities arrived the following morning. The property was never sold. Wildlife officials later arrived equipped with snake hooks, tongs, and secure bags to capture the Bushmaster, which they relocated to a protected forest area several miles from human habitation. Marco would later tell investigators that his father-in-law had seemed convinced, until nearly the end, that his body would overcome the venom naturally, that his decades of toughness would see him through. It was November 16th, 2019, in Chiang Mai Province, Thailand. Long after the last tour bus had left and the sanctuary gates were locked, the grounds sat under uneven security lighting, quiet except for insects and the occasional low rumble from the barns. It was the kind of stillness that comes after routine has ended, when systems are shut down and nothing is meant to be moving. A fragile calm that made the intrusion that followed both sudden and fatal. Mayrin Kul was 17, a vocational student studying basic electrical repair, known among classmates as reserved in person but restless online. She followed urban exploration trends and short-form videos that showed abandoned factories, closed malls, and restricted spaces entered after hours. Her own clips were simple and rarely shared beyond a small circle of friends, but she chased the same escalation pattern she saw elsewhere. That night, she wanted footage that proved she could slip past a locked gate and approach something large and forbidden. She had no experience with animals beyond city strays and had never been inside a working sanctuary. Mayrin's habits were consistent, scouting locations in daylight, returning late when security thinned, filming quietly, then leaving before sunrise. She likely understood the sanctuary was closed and that entering was illegal, but she must have viewed it as low risk. The sanctuary sat among trees and dirt paths, with barns casting long shadows and the smell of hay and damp soil hanging in the air. Asian elephants commonly weigh between 6,000 and 8,000 pounds, can move faster than a running human over short distances, and use their heads and forelegs to pin threats, especially when startled or guarding space. Even without tusks, the mass alone is enough to crush ribs and collapse lungs through sustained pressure. Signs near the perimeter gate clearly warned of guard animals and unstable elephants after dark. Earlier that week, staff had observed heightened agitation from a matriarch near the barn, triggered by another injured elephant, making her protective behavior predictable. Chains used overnight were intentionally loose to prevent joint strain, giving the animals limited mobility. Mayrin ignored all of this. She slipped through a service gap just after midnight, phone recording in hand, grinning at the adventure and acting as if the posted warnings and obvious risks didn't apply to her. She hadn't even paused to consider the potential consequences of crossing open ground past restless, chained elephants in the dark. Security footage later showed her approaching the barn from the front, whispering toward the camera. The elephant stood broadside, ears partially extended, body angled between the barn wall and open space. Her movement caused the elephant's ears to flare slightly and trunk to lift briefly. Subtle warning signs often ignored by intruders. Mayrin stepped closer, raising her phone higher, then reached out to touch the animal's trunk. Her movement broke the stillness. In a chilling breach of their typical defensive protocol, the elephant dispensed with all warning. It did not trumpet, nor did it bluff. It simply surged forward in a direct, silent, and devastatingly rare full charge. The first impact drove Mayrin backward into the wooden barn wall. The sound was flat and heavy. An autopsy later showed that ribs cracked under compressive force as her back was struck and stopped. Before she could fall, the elephant pressed its forehead into her chest, lifting her slightly off her feet and pinning her upright. The footage showed her arms splay outward as the pressure fixed her in place, breath forced out in a visible spasm. The elephant leaned in, weight transferring through the skull and forelegs. Mayrin's chest visibly deformed as ribs likely failed inward. Blood ran from her nose and mouth in thin streams, darkening her shirt and dripping onto the dirt. Her legs buckled but could not move away. The elephant applied sustained pressure for several seconds before shifting its weight, then maintaining contact briefly before rising. Her body compressed further, the wall behind her creaking as the pressure increased. Any movement stopped early in that interval. The elephant shifted slightly once, adjusting balance, then settled again, maintaining contact for a short duration before finally stepping back. Mayrin collapsed flat, unmoving, her phone skidding across the ground. A night guard discovered her during an intermittent round at 12:30 a.m., alerted by the fallen phone screen, still glowing. He retreated immediately and called emergency services. Paramedics arrived in 14 minutes, but confirmed death on scene without intervention. The elephant was secured without sedation. The coroner report listed fatal compressive chest trauma with multiple bilateral rib fractures, collapsed lungs, and cardiac contusion. Death was attributed to compressive chest trauma and asphyxia caused by sustained body weight compression. No defensive injuries were noted beyond minor abrasions. The sanctuary released a brief statement acknowledging an unauthorized entry and fatal incident. Mayrin's family held a small funeral 3 days later, attended by relatives and classmates. The video never circulated publicly. The barn returned to routine use, but staff adjusted overnight protocols, aware that the quiet after closing could no longer be assumed safe. It was August 9th, 2018, and the tropical heat shimmered over Komodo National Park as 42-year-old James Mitchell separated from his tour group to explore what he believed was a more interesting trail. The Australian businessman had paid for a guided tour of the park, but was frustrated by what he considered the guide's overcautious approach and slow pace. James wanted to see Komodo dragons up close, not from the safe distances the guide maintained. James had extensive hiking experience in Australia and considered himself an expert outdoorsman. He dismissed the guide's warnings about Komodo dragons as exaggerations designed to keep tourists dependent on guides. When the group stopped for lunch at a designated safe area, James quietly slipped away down a trail that the guide had specifically warned was off-limits due to high dragon activity. The trail led through dense brush into an area where Komodo dragons were known to hunt and feed. James had researched the dragons online and convinced himself that their reputation was overblown. He'd read that they were primarily scavengers and that attacks on humans were rare. Komodo dragons are the world's largest lizards, with adults reaching lengths of 10 feet and weights exceeding 300 pounds. These apex predators possess serrated teeth and venomous saliva containing anticoagulant compounds that prevent blood clotting and cause severe shock in bite victims. They can run up to 12 miles per hour in short bursts and have been known to attack water buffalo, deer, and occasionally humans. James had been walking for about 20 minutes when he spotted a large Komodo dragon lying in dappled shade about 30 feet from the trail. The dragon appeared to be resting, its massive body motionless except for the slow rise and fall of its breathing. James was thrilled by the opportunity to photograph the dragon at close range without the guide's interference. James approached slowly, his camera raised, believing that the dragon's apparent rest meant it was unaware of his presence. What James didn't understand was that Komodo dragons often appear inactive while actually monitoring their surroundings carefully through their acute sense of smell. James managed to get within 15 feet of the dragon before it moved. The massive reptile exploded into motion with shocking speed, its powerful legs propelling its 250-pound body forward in a charge that covered the distance in startling speed. The dragon's jaws clamped onto his left thigh, its serrated teeth tearing through muscle and severing major blood vessels. The dragon's bite force, combined with its thrashing head movements, caused massive tissue damage and arterial bleeding. Anticoagulant compounds in the dragon's saliva rapidly worsened the bleeding and began driving James into shock. James screamed and tried to pull away, but the dragon maintained its grip while its claws raked across his legs and lower abdomen. James managed to break free from the dragon's grip and stumbled backward, but the damage was catastrophic. Blood poured from the deep lacerations on his thigh, and the anticoagulant compounds in the dragon's venom prevented the wounds from clotting properly. The Komodo dragon didn't pursue James after the initial attack. Instead, it remained in the area, monitoring the situation from a distance as James attempted to move away. James managed to walk about 50 yards back toward the main trail before blood loss and the effects of the venom-induced shock caused him to collapse. The tour guide discovered James was missing during a head count after lunch and immediately organized a search. They found James unconscious on the trail an hour after the attack, with the Komodo dragon still in the vicinity. Park rangers drove the dragon away and called for emergency medical evacuation, but James had lost massive amounts of blood and was in severe shock. James died during helicopter transport to the nearest hospital, roughly 3 hours after the initial attack. The medical team noted that with immediate medical intervention at the time of the bite, survival might have been possible. However, the 90-minute delay before discovery, combined with the severity of the arterial damage and the anticoagulant effects of the venom, had made his injuries unsurvivable. The investigation revealed that James had deliberately separated from his tour group and ignored multiple warning signs. The Komodo dragon was not destroyed, as it had exhibited normal defensive and hunting behavior. Park officials used James's case to emphasize the importance of following guide instructions. It was June 3rd, 2013, and Glacier National Park's rugged wilderness stretched endlessly under the clear Montana sky, a pristine landscape of towering peaks, dense forests, and hidden valleys that had remained largely unchanged for thousands of years. The Highline Trail, one of the park's most popular hiking routes, wound through prime wildlife habitat where mountain goats, Bighorn sheep and occasionally mountain lions made their homes among the rocky outcrops and alpine meadows. Robert Martinez had been hiking alone in wilderness areas for over a decade, building a reputation among his friends and co-workers as someone who could handle any situation the backcountry might present. At 35, he was a laid-off construction supervisor from Denver who used hiking as both physical exercise and emotional therapy, often spending weeks at a time in remote areas where he felt most at peace. His recent job loss had hit him hard, and this solo trip to Glacier was his way of proving to himself that he was still capable and self-reliant. Bob's hiking philosophy was built on the belief that confidence and knowledge could overcome any wilderness challenge. He had encountered black bears, elk, and even a few mountain lions during his years of solo hiking, and each successful encounter had reinforced his conviction that he understood wildlife behavior better than most people. He often told stories of staring down aggressive animals and forcing them to retreat through sheer force of will. Mountain lions, also known as cougars or pumas, are North America's largest wild cats, with adult males weighing up to 220 pounds and measuring over 8 feet from nose to tail. They are solitary, territorial predators perfectly adapted for stealth hunting, capable of leaping 40 feet horizontally and 15 feet vertically. Mountain lions typically avoid human contact, but when confronted, they can become extremely dangerous. Their powerful jaws can crush skulls, and their retractable claws are designed for gripping and tearing flesh. Most importantly, direct eye contact and aggressive behavior toward a mountain lion can trigger an attack response rather than causing the animal to retreat. That morning, Bob had been hiking the Highline Trail for several hours when he encountered a large male mountain lion on a narrow section of path with steep drops on both sides. The 150-pound cat was blocking the trail about 30 feet ahead, apparently unaware of Bob's presence as it focused on something in the valley below. Instead of following established protocol for mountain lion encounters, making himself appear large, avoiding direct eye contact, and backing away slowly while speaking in a calm, firm voice, Bob decided to assert dominance over the predator. He had convinced himself that his previous encounters had taught him how to communicate with wild animals through body language and confidence. Bob began walking directly toward the mountain lion, making direct eye contact and speaking in what he believed was an authoritative tone. The cat immediately noticed his approach and turned to face him, its ears flattening against its head and its tail beginning to twitch, clear warning signs that Bob either didn't recognize or chose to ignore. The mountain lion's response was swift and devastating. Interpreting Bob's direct approach and eye contact as an aggressive challenge to its territory, the 150-pound predator launched itself across the distance between them with explosive power. Bob had no time to react, as 150 pounds of muscle and claws slammed into his chest, knocking him backward onto the rocky trail. The mountain lion's powerful hind claws raked across Bob's torso, tearing through his hiking clothes and opening deep gashes in his chest and abdomen. The cat's front paws, equipped with razor-sharp retractable claws, found purchase on Bob's shoulders and neck, puncturing vital blood vessels and causing immediate, massive bleeding. The mountain lion's jaws clamped down on Bob's neck with crushing force, its canine teeth designed for delivering killing bites to prey. The bite severed major arteries and damaged Bob's spinal cord, causing immediate paralysis and catastrophic blood loss. Bob's struggles grew weaker as the predator's assault continued, each bite and claw strike causing additional trauma to his already devastated body. The attack lasted less than a minute, but the damage was irreversible. Bob's movements ceased as massive blood loss and spinal trauma overwhelmed his system, his wilderness expertise proving useless against a predator that had evolved for exactly this type of encounter. The mountain lion maintained its position over Bob's body for several minutes before retreating into the dense forest. Bob's body was discovered the following day by other hikers who had become concerned when he failed to return from his planned day hike. The investigation revealed that Bob had violated every established protocol for mountain lion encounters, turning what should have been a manageable wildlife situation into a fatal confrontation. The aggressive cat was tracked by wildlife officials, but was never located. Bob's death sent shockwaves through the hiking community, where his experience and confidence had made him a respected figure. His funeral was attended by dozens of fellow hikers who struggled to understand how someone with his knowledge and experience could have made such a catastrophic error in judgment. It was November 22, 2016, and polar darkness had settled over Novaya Zemlya 3 weeks earlier. The remote Russian archipelago had not seen sunlight since early November. Wind-driven snow swept horizontally across the frozen landscape, reducing visibility to near zero, even under artificial light. A decommissioned military weather station on the archipelago's southern island maintained a skeleton crew of civilian contractors keeping basic meteorological equipment operational. The station's infrastructure had deteriorated significantly since its military abandonment, with perimeter fencing partially collapsed, exterior lighting unreliable, and heating systems requiring constant manual adjustment. Garbage from the station's small mess hall had been deposited in open bins less than 30 meters from the main building for weeks, a violation of waste management protocols that no one had corrected. Rodion Vershkov was a 43-year-old maintenance technician from Arkhangelsk who had rotated through remote Arctic postings for over a decade. His current assignment required him to maintain the station's aging diesel generators, water systems, and heating infrastructure, work that frequently demanded checks at all hours, regardless of conditions. He was the only maintenance contractor on site during the current rotation, supported by 2 meteorological observers working alternating shifts inside the main building. Deep claw marks were discovered on the generator shed's exterior door, consistent with bear activity. The station supervisor had filed a request for wildlife deterrent supplies, but no delivery had been scheduled. Rodion had been warned about the tracks and had acknowledged the danger. The primary generator began showing fluctuating output readings at approximately 9:40 p.m. The generator shed sat roughly 25 meters from the main building's rear exit, connected by a gravel path with a single overhead floodlight that had been inoperative for several days. Rodion pulled on his heavy parka and exited through the rear door, leaving his rifle propped inside the doorframe. The round trip to check the generator's fuel line typically took less than 3 minutes. He stepped into the darkness, and the door swung shut behind him. Many documented predatory attacks involve adult males, often in compromised body condition. Unlike defensive attacks by females with cubs, predatory approaches by these animals are deliberate, committed, and rarely preceded by warning displays. These bears have been documented testing structures, following human scent trails, and stalking victims over considerable distances. A nutritionally stressed male is far more likely to treat a human encounter as a feeding opportunity, and once feeding begins, disengagement becomes less common unless disturbed. In wind and mechanical noise, the approach can go undetected until the final seconds, and the killing bite is typically directed at the head and neck. Investigators reconstructed events from physical evidence. Boot prints indicated Rodion had reached the shed and opened its door. A second set of tracks, attributed to a large adult male, approached from the direction of the waste bins along a path downwind of Rodion's position. The generator's mechanical noise, still cycling at the time of the investigation, would have likely masked the sound of the bear's approach. The attack occurred between the shed and the main building as Rodion made his return. Drag marks indicated the initial strike knocked him to the ground within meters of the shed door. The force of the impact left deep impressions in the frozen ground where his body had been driven down. Blood evidence and tissue indicated a predatory cranial bite. The drag trail extended approximately 70 meters from the point of contact, leading northeast away from the station toward open tundra. The trail showed continuous drag marks without interruption, indicating the bear had maintained its grip throughout. A meteorological observer noticed the generator output had not stabilized and attempted to radio Rodion at approximately 10:15 p.m. Receiving no response, he moved to the rear door and discovered it ajar, Rodion's rifle still leaning against the frame. Using the station's emergency spotlight, he identified the drag trail in the snow leading away from the building. He sealed the station and radioed for emergency assistance. A military team reached the station by helicopter the following morning once weather permitted safe flight. Rodion Vershkov's partial remains were recovered approximately 200 meters from the station, partially sheltered behind a snow berm consistent with predatory feeding behavior. Feeding appeared limited, possibly due to weather conditions or human activity near the station. The bear was located during coordinated ground tracking operations and destroyed 2 days later. The investigation cited deteriorated perimeter infrastructure, accumulated food waste, inoperative lighting, and the absent firearm as critical factors. It was November 8th, 2019, at a private roadside animal facility nestled in the rural hills of Southeast Asia, where exotic cats were kept in aging enclosures for tourist viewing. The facility operated with minimal oversight, relying on entrance fees from backpackers seeking close encounters with dangerous wildlife. After-hours access was poorly controlled, with low public barriers and inadequate lighting creating safety hazards. The primary enclosures consisted of chain-link fencing with mesh spacing, large enough for a large cat's paw to reach through. Brooke Landon, a 25-year-old marketing coordinator on a backpacking adventure, had arrived with her travel companion, a 27-year-old hospitality worker known for seeking thrilling experiences and dramatic social media content. The companion had been urging increasingly bold photo opportunities throughout their journey, pushing boundaries at every tourist stop. Their charter driver, a 41-year-old local patient, waited in the parking area while expressing concerns about their after-hours exploration plans. A 63-year-old groundskeeper had earlier directed visitors to remain behind the public barriers, but his warnings were dismissed as the facility prepared to close. The facility housed several large cats, including a mature female tiger that had been pacing restlessly along her enclosure's perimeter. The tiger had shown increasing agitation throughout the day as visitors gathered near her fence, and the approaching evening feeding time had heightened her predatory instincts. The standoff barrier was designed to keep visitors beyond the animal's reach, but its low height made it easy to cross for those seeking closer contact. Tigers are the largest wild cats in the world, with adult females weighing up to 350 pounds and possessing incredible strength and agility. These apex predators have evolved as solitary hunters, equipped with retractable claws up to 4 inches long and canine teeth measuring over 2 inches. A tiger's forelimbs are incredibly powerful, capable of delivering strikes with enough force to break bones and drag prey weighing several hundred pounds. Their hunting instincts are triggered by movement, and they possess lightning-fast reflexes that allow them to strike with deadly precision. Tigers in captivity often develop heightened territorial behaviors, becoming increasingly aggressive toward perceived threats. The attack unfolded with devastating speed as Brooke crossed the public barrier and positioned herself against the primary chain-link fence for a dramatic photograph. The female tiger, measuring over 8 feet in length, had been tracking her movement from inside the enclosure. As Brooke leaned against the mesh to adjust her pose, decorative items on her clothing swayed within the tiger's reach zone. The tiger lunged forward with explosive power, hooking Brooke's clothing and forearm through the mesh with her massive forepaw. The 4-inch claws penetrated deep into flesh and fabric, creating multiple puncture wounds along her arm. The tiger's incredible strength immediately pulled Brooke tight against the fence, trapping her against the chain-link barrier. The predator shifted her grip, clamping her powerful jaws around Brooke's arm near the shoulder. The tiger's canine teeth, designed for crushing bone and severing major blood vessels, penetrated through muscle and into the joint capsule. The bite force, measuring over 1,000 pounds per square inch, caused immediate fractures to the humerus and severe damage to the shoulder's vascular network. The tiger maintained her grip while shaking her massive head from side to side, a natural behavior used to subdue struggling prey. This violent motion tore through tendons, muscles, and major arteries in Brooke's shoulder and upper arm. Blood began flowing freely from multiple puncture wounds as the tiger's teeth severed the brachial artery and damaged surrounding tissue. The tiger continued to bite and crush the trapped limb through the fence. The sustained pressure from the powerful jaws caused progressive tissue destruction and massive internal bleeding. The tiger's claws, still embedded in her arm and torso, created additional wounds that contributed to the rapid blood loss. The struggle lasted less than 2 minutes as the tiger maintained control. The combination of crushing bite force, arterial damage, and multiple puncture wounds caused Brooke's blood pressure to drop rapidly. Shock set in as her body's systems began shutting down from the massive trauma and blood loss. Facility staff arrived within minutes, but the tiger refused to release her grip. Only after several attempts to distract the animal did she finally let go and retreat. By then, Brooke had lost consciousness from severe blood loss and trauma. Emergency responders transported Brooke to the nearest medical facility, but the extent of her injuries proved fatal. The combination of arterial damage, bone fractures, and massive tissue destruction had caused irreversible shock and organ failure. She was pronounced pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The incident prompted an immediate investigation by local authorities, focusing on the facility's inadequate safety barriers and lack of supervision. International animal welfare organizations called for stricter regulations governing tourist interactions with dangerous wildlife. Brooks' family released a statement urging travelers to research safety standards at exotic animal facilities. It was August 3rd, 2018, and the morning sun had already baked the red earth of Mukuvisi woodlands into a hard crust. Lemani Chikweche was 6 hours away from retirement, unaware that one of Africa's deadliest serpents lay coiled in the shadows. Lemani Chikweche was a 58-year-old senior ranger at the Mukuvisi Woodlands Reserve on Harare's southern outskirts. He had built his reputation on strict adherence to bush safety protocols and an almost legendary ability to read animal behavior. Rangers half his age still repeated his training mantras about snake identification and proper evacuation procedures. This final patrol before his retirement ceremony was meant to be ceremonial, a last walk through the territory he had protected for 3 decades. That morning's patrol was routine by design. Lemani had requested a junior ranger named Tapiwa Moyo accompany him, wanting to pass along final observations about the eastern boundary trails where poaching signs had recently appeared. At approximately 10:15 a.m., Lemani stopped the patrol vehicle near a large termite mound, roughly 200 yards from the main access road. He informed Tapiwa he needed to relieve himself and would step behind the mound for privacy. Tapiwa remained in the vehicle, facing the direction Lemani had gone, maintaining standard protocol for paired patrols. The area around the mound showed signs of recent animal activity, disturbed soil and scattered debris that might have indicated a burrow system nearby. The entire reserve had experienced an unusually active snake season that year, with sightings up nearly 40% according to incident logs. Staff meetings had emphasized heightened caution, particularly around rock piles and termite structures where mambas often sheltered during the heat of the day. Lemani himself had led 2 of those training sessions, demonstrating proper approach techniques and safe distances. Less than 30 seconds after disappearing behind the mound, Lemani suddenly recoiled back into view. His movement was sharp and controlled rather than panicked. Tapiwa watched as Lemani pivoted to face him, his right hand gripping his left calf. Without raising his voice, Lemani stated clearly that he had been bitten and pointed toward the base of the termite mound, where a large gray-brown snake was withdrawing into a crevice. Tapiwa, who had completed Lemani's own snake identification course, immediately recognized the coffin-shaped head and rapid retreat as characteristic of a black mamba. Black mambas can grow up to 14 feet in length, making them Africa's longest venomous snake. They possess potent neurotoxic venom that, without treatment, causes respiratory paralysis. Unlike many snakes that bite defensively and retreat, mambas are known for their speed, capable of moving at 12 miles per hour, and their tendency to deliver multiple strikes when cornered. Tapiwa immediately moved in, applied a broad pressure bandage, and splinted Lemani's lower limb. They carried him to the vehicle on an improvised stretcher to avoid exertion. The wrap covered the entire lower leg from the toes upward with firm, even pressure. 2 small puncture wounds were visible on Lemani's lower left calf, approximately 3 inches above the ankle, with minimal bleeding. With Tapiwa's assistance, Lemani was secured in the passenger seat, while Tapiwa drove toward the main gate at reduced speed, avoiding the jolts and bumps that might accelerate venom circulation. The internal dirt track was rutted and uneven, forcing speeds below 15 miles per hour for much of the 3-mile distance. Approximately 20 minutes after the bite, Lemani reported numbness spreading from his foot up through his knee. His speech remained clear, but he mentioned a metallic taste in his mouth, a known early symptom of neurotoxin absorption. By the time they reached the main gate 30 minutes later, his eyelids had begun drooping, and his words came slower. The reserve's radio contact with external medical services had been intermittent due to equipment issues, causing a 15-minute delay in ambulance dispatch. No black mamba antivenom was stored at the reserve, requiring transport to a hospital in central Harare. Vision blurring became pronounced as they met the ambulance at the highway junction. During the ambulance ride, his respiratory effort became labored despite oxygen administration. Paralysis was advancing through the muscle groups controlling breathing. They reached the hospital 77 minutes after the bite. Medical staff administered polyvalent antivenom, but the neurological damage had already progressed significantly. Lamine lost consciousness as respiratory muscles failed. Mechanical ventilation was initiated, but his condition continued deteriorating. He was pronounced dead at 1:43 p.m. from respiratory arrest secondary to neurotoxic envenomation. Mukuvisi Woodlands held a small memorial service 3 days later, attended by rangers Lamani had trained and the families he had served alongside. Local news covered the incident briefly, noting the irony of an experienced ranger dying from the very hazard he had spent decades teaching others to avoid. It was July 3, 2016, and the oppressive Florida heat hung over the suburban neighborhood of Port Charlotte as 41-year-old Donald Reeves carried an 8-foot alligator through his front door and into his living room. The construction worker had found the gator in a drainage canal behind his property, and, despite Florida's strict laws against keeping alligators without permits, decided that the reptile would make an interesting pet that would impress his friends during the upcoming 4th of July barbecue. Donald had grown up in Florida and had what he considered extensive experience with alligators, having seen them regularly throughout his life in canals, ponds, and golf courses. This familiarity had bred a dangerous contempt for the reptile's predatory nature. He'd caught small gators as a teenager and had convinced himself that they were manageable if you knew how to handle them. Donald set up what he believed was an adequate enclosure in his garage, a large plastic pool surrounded by plywood barriers. He fed the alligator raw chicken, which he'd named Chomper. American alligators of this size possess tremendously powerful jaws and razor-sharp teeth, making them capable of inflicting catastrophic injuries if handled or provoked. Alligators are not domesticable animals and do not form bonds with humans regardless of feeding or handling. They are ambush predators with lightning-fast reflexes and will attack when they perceive an opportunity or feel threatened. Over the next 3 weeks, Donald had been feeding the reptile heavily, providing multiple meals per day in the warm garage environment, which increased its strength and aggression significantly. He began allowing the reptile more freedom, letting it roam his garage and even bringing it into his house for short periods. Donald's girlfriend had moved out after discovering the alligator, warning him that his obsession would get him killed. On the evening of July 24th, Donald had been drinking beer while watching television when he decided to bring Chomper into the living room to take photos for social media. Donald placed the alligator on his living room floor and knelt beside it to take a selfie, holding a beer in one hand while reaching towards the gator with the other. The moment Donald's hand came within range, the alligator's head whipped around with explosive speed, its jaws clamping onto Donald's forearm with crushing force. Donald screamed and tried to pull away, but the alligator's grip was absolute. The reptile began thrashing violently, using its powerful neck muscles to pull Donald off balance. Donald fell forward, and the alligator immediately went into a death roll, spinning its body while maintaining its grip. The rotational force dislocated Donald's shoulder and tore massive chunks of flesh from his forearm, causing severe bleeding. The confined space of the living room, combined with the bright lights, loud television, and Donald's screaming, created an overstimulating environment that kept the alligator in a heightened state of aggression. Donald's screams brought neighbors running to his front door, but by the time they arrived, the alligator had pulled the weakening Donald across portions of the living room floor, leaving a trail of blood. Neighbors began pounding on the door and windows, shouting and trying to distract the animal. One neighbor threw a potted plant through the window, hoping the noise would startle the reptile, while another attempted to open the front door, but found it locked. Their efforts only seemed to agitate the alligator further. The reptile released Donald's mangled arm and immediately lunged for a new target, its jaws clamping onto Donald's thigh. The alligator's teeth penetrated deep into the muscle, causing catastrophic vascular damage to the upper thigh, including rupture of major blood vessels. Blood began pouring from the wound at an alarming rate. The alligator continued thrashing as it maintained its grip. Donald's struggles weakened rapidly, as blood loss from both wounds took its toll. Neighbors called 911, but the alligator's continued aggression prevented anyone from safely entering the house. By the time wildlife officers arrived with proper equipment, Donald had lost consciousness from massive blood loss. The officers used catch poles and shields to control the reptile. Once secured, paramedics rushed in and worked frantically to stabilize Donald, applying tourniquets and pressure bandages, but the damage to his femoral artery proved fatal. Donald was pronounced dead at the scene. The investigation revealed that Donald had been keeping the alligator illegally for nearly a month. The heavy feeding regimen and warm conditions had increased the reptile's strength and aggression. The alligator was euthanized. Officials used Donald's case in public safety campaigns. It was September 15, 2014, and the Great Smoky Mountains National Park settled into the quiet darkness of a cool autumn night. The Elkmont campground, nestled among towering hardwoods just beginning their fall color change, hosted dozens of campers enjoying the perfect weather and spectacular scenery. The air carried the scent of wood smoke from campfires and the earthy smell of fallen leaves, while the distant calls of owls and the rustle of small animals created the peaceful soundtrack of wilderness camping. Jake Morrison had arrived at the campground 3 days earlier, seeking solitude and clarity after a devastating breakup that had ended his 5-year relationship and left him questioning everything about his future. At 29, he was a software developer from Nashville who had never been much of an outdoorsman, but he had convinced himself that a solo camping trip would help him process his emotions and figure out his next steps. What he hadn't planned on was drinking his way through the pain instead of confronting it. Jake's campsite was a disaster zone that violated every basic rule of bear safety. Empty beer cans littered the picnic table. Food wrappers were scattered across the ground, and a cooler full of snacks sat open and unattended. He had ignored the detailed bear safety information provided at check-in, dismissing the warnings as overblown scare tactics designed to frighten inexperienced campers. His attitude was that black bears were essentially large raccoons, more afraid of humans than dangerous to them. Black bears are North America's most common bear species, with adults weighing between 200 and 400 pounds. While generally less aggressive than grizzlies, black bears become extremely dangerous when defending food sources or feeling cornered. They possess incredible strength, with the ability to break down doors and tear apart cars in search of food. Their powerful claws and teeth can inflict devastating injuries, and their speed and agility make escape nearly impossible once an attack begins. Most importantly, black bears that associate humans with food often become aggressive and must be destroyed by wildlife officials. That evening, Jake had consumed nearly a dozen beers while sitting around his campfire, drowning his sorrows and growing increasingly belligerent about his ex-girlfriend and his perceived failures in life. As the night wore on, and other campers retired to their tents, Jake continued drinking and making noise, oblivious to the wildlife activity around him. He had left food scattered around his campsite, creating an irresistible attractant for the park's bear population. Around 2 a.m., Jake stumbled out of his tent to relieve himself and noticed a large black bear at his picnic table, methodically working through the snacks and garbage he had left out. The 300-pound male bear was focused on the easy meal, but he was also alert to Jake's presence. In his intoxicated state, Jake saw this as a personal affront. The bear was stealing his food and invading his space. Instead of retreating to his tent and waiting for the bear to leave, Jake decided to confront the animal. He began yelling and cursing at the bear, demanding that it leave his campsite. When the bear continued eating, Jake escalated his aggression, throwing empty beer cans and rocks at the massive predator. His alcohol-impaired judgment had convinced him that he could intimidate the bear into retreating. The bear's response was immediate and violent. Feeling cornered and threatened while defending a valuable food source, the 300-pound predator charged Jake with surprising speed. Jake tried to run, but his intoxicated state made coordination impossible, and he stumbled and fell within seconds of the bear's charge. The black bear was on him immediately, using its powerful claws to rake across Jake's face and torso. The bear's claws, designed for climbing trees and tearing apart logs, sliced through Jake's clothing and flesh like razors. Deep gashes opened across his chest and arms, severing muscles and arteries while causing massive blood loss. The bear's jaws clamped down on Jake's shoulder, the crushing force breaking bones and tearing through vital tissue. Jake's screams echoed through the campground as the bear continued its assault. Driven by a combination of food defense and territorial aggression, the predator's teeth punctured Jake's neck and face, causing catastrophic trauma to his airway and major blood vessels. Jake's struggles grew weaker as blood loss and shock set in. The bear's continued attack opened multiple wounds across his torso and limbs, each injury contributing to his rapid deterioration. Within minutes, Jake's movements ceased as massive blood loss and trauma overwhelmed his system. The bear maintained its aggressive posture over Jake's body for several minutes before returning to the food at the picnic table. Other campers, awakened by Jake's screams, had called park rangers and were maintaining safe distances while the bear finished its meal and eventually wandered back into the forest. Park rangers arrived within 20 minutes but could only confirm Jake's death and secure the scene. The investigation revealed the extent of Jake's safety violations and his intoxicated state at the time of the attack. The aggressive bear was tracked and destroyed the following day, as it had become habituated to human food sources and posed an ongoing threat to campers. Jake's death prompted increased enforcement of food storage regulations and mandatory bear safety briefings for all campers. His family struggled to understand how their son's pain over a breakup had led to such reckless behavior and ultimately cost him his life. It was August 22, 2020, in the murky waters of a Gulf Coast inlet channel where the outgoing tide created perfect conditions for spearfishing. The channel mouth connected a series of backwater bays to the open Gulf, creating a natural funnel where baitfish congregated and predators followed. Visibility in the brackish water rarely exceeded 20 feet, and the strong tidal current carried scents far downstream along the underwater drop-off that marked deeper water. The late afternoon sun penetrated only the surface layers, leaving the depths shrouded in an ominous green darkness. Tyler Garrison, a 28-year-old construction worker, had planned this spearfishing trip with his dive buddy, a 31-year-old carpenter known for his overconfident approach to underwater hunting. The carpenter had suggested this particular spot, claiming it held larger fish than their usual locations and boasting about previous successful hunts in these treacherous waters. Their boat operator, a 44-year-old handyman with years of local knowledge, had anchored near the channel mouth and warned them about the strong current and limited visibility. A shore angler fishing from the nearby jetty rocks had noticed unusual baitfish activity, with schools scattering erratically near the drop-off, a telltale sign that larger predators were already in the area. Tyler entered the water carrying his spear gun and a metal stringer, which he clipped directly to his weight belt instead of using the recommended float system that would tow his catch safely behind him. This decision would prove fatal, as the stringer kept any speared fish directly against his body, where blood and scent would create an irresistible attraction for the channel's apex predators. The ebbing tide was already pushing a scent trail downstream along the very edge where bull sharks typically patrol during feeding hours. Bull sharks are among the most dangerous predators in coastal waters, capable of thriving in both saltwater and brackish environments. These powerful hunters can reach lengths of 11 feet and weights exceeding 500 pounds, with a powerful bite capable of severing flesh and bone. Unlike many shark species, bull sharks are highly aggressive and territorial, often investigating disturbances with direct, purposeful approaches. Their ability to hunt in shallow, murky water makes them particularly dangerous to divers and swimmers. Bull sharks rely heavily on their acute sense of smell, capable of detecting very low concentrations in flowing water. Their stocky build and powerful tail provide explosive acceleration, allowing them to close distances with frightening speed. The attack began as Tyler swam toward a shallow sandbar with 3 freshly speared fish bleeding from the stringer at his hip. A large bull shark, measuring approximately 9 feet in length, had been patrolling the drop-off when the scent trail reached its sensitive olfactory system. The shark approached with the characteristic behavior of its species, making short, direct passes to assess the source of the blood. Each pass brought the predator closer as it homed in on the strongest concentration of scent. The first contact came as a fast bump against the dangling fish mass. Tyler felt the impact, but continued swimming toward the sandbar, unaware that the shark was circling tighter with each pass. The predator returned within seconds, this time committing to a full attack. Its powerful jaws clamped down across the stringer, catching both the bleeding fish and Tyler's outer thigh in a devastating bite. The shark's serrated teeth, designed for cutting through flesh and bone, penetrated deep into the muscle tissue of Tyler's leg. The initial bite severed several major blood vessels, including branches of the femoral artery. The shark shook its head laterally with tremendous force, a behavior designed to tear away chunks of flesh from large prey. This violent shaking motion caused massive tissue damage and freed most of the fish from the stringer, but the predator maintained its grip on Tyler's leg. Blood immediately began pouring from the wound, creating an expanding crimson cloud in the water. The shark released its hold and veered away, but the scent of fresh human blood triggered an immediate return. The second attack came higher on Tyler's inner thigh, where the shark's teeth found the femoral artery itself. The bite crushed muscle, severed the major blood vessel, and caused catastrophic hemorrhaging. Tyler's body went into shock as blood loss reached critical levels. The warm Gulf water around him turned red as his life drained away through the massive wounds. His ability to swim effectively disappeared within moments as weakness overcame him. The shark, having inflicted the fatal damage, disappeared into the murky depths without making further contact. The boat operator spotted the blood in the water and immediately moved to Tyler's location, but the damage was already irreversible. Despite rapid transport to shore and emergency medical response, Tyler succumbed to massive blood loss before reaching the hospital. The attack had lasted less than 2 minutes, but the bull shark's precision in targeting major blood vessels made survival impossible. The incident prompted a review of spearfishing safety protocols by local dive operators, with emphasis on proper stringer techniques and buddy system procedures. Tyler's family issued a statement calling for better education about shark safety in Gulf waters. The attack highlighted the particular dangers of spearfishing in low-visibility environments where predators can approach undetected. It was June 14, 2015, along the Front Range of Colorado, where a clear summer afternoon had drawn weekend hikers into foothills that looked forgiving from a distance. The terrain appeared gentle, the trail busy enough to feel safe, and the danger, when it arrived, came from behind, fast and silent, ending the outing in a matter of seconds. Hannah Rourke was 28, a retail shift supervisor from Fort Collins, who spent most of her weeks on her feet under fluorescent lights. She was known by co-workers as reliable and upbeat, the kind of person who volunteered for extra shifts and organized group outings to feel less boxed in by routine. Hiking was something she did casually, not as a discipline, but as an escape. She owned decent boots, carried a phone with good storage for photos, and relied on friends for navigation. That weekend trip was meant to be restorative. Hannah had recently talked about applying for a store transfer closer to Denver and wanted a break before making decisions. Friends later said she was in high spirits, eager to document the hike with photos to share afterward. Her lack of wildlife experience wasn't unusual. She believed danger came from cliffs and weather, not animals she associated with zoos or distant wilderness. The trail cut through scrub oak and granite outcrops, dry needles crunching underfoot as wind moved steadily downslope. Mountain lions, also known as cougars, are ambush predators weighing up to 150 pounds, capable of sprinting over 35 miles per hour in short bursts. They can leap more than 15 feet vertically or 40 feet horizontally, delivering powerful forelimb swipes and crushing bites to the neck or skull. Cougars routinely cache or defend cubs aggressively when humans approach, and their strength and agility make even a single adult capable of inflicting fatal injuries within seconds if it surprises a person. Several warnings went unheeded. A trailhead sign mentioned recent cougar activity, and a ranger truck had been parked there earlier that morning. As the group rounded a rocky spur, one hiker noticed movement near a shallow crevice. A small, spotted cougar kitten stood exposed on a sun-warmed ledge, vocalizing weakly. One friend cautioned that the mother would be close. Another suggested backing away. Ignoring repeated warning signs from others in the group, Hannah stepped forward instead, mesmerized by the animal's size and stillness. The kitten did not flee. Hannah crouched, lifted it, and laughed as it squirmed, holding it chest high. The group clustered tightly, focusing forward. No one looked upslope. No one heard the approach. The adult cougar launched from behind a boulder 20 feet away. The first impact drove Hannah forward, slamming her into the ground. The cat's jaws closed over her right shoulder and neck area, teeth piercing muscle and tearing tissue. As she fell, its rear claws raked downward, tearing the muscles of both thighs. One claw cut deeply into her upper left thigh near the femoral artery, causing rapid bleeding. Blood pooled quickly and ran along the trail. The cougar adjusted its grip, crushing down briefly before releasing and seizing the kitten from Hannah's arms. The mother immediately retreated into cover, dragging the cub uphill out of sight. Hannah lay on her side, legs jerking reflexively as blood pooled beneath her. Her hands pressed weakly at her thigh, fingers slick and red, but pressure was uneven and ineffective. Within seconds, her movements slowed. The group erupted, fragmenting in a burst of panic. One friend dropped to their knees, attempting to compress the wound with bare hands. Another dialed 911 at 2:38 p.m., screaming for help and struggling to describe the location. No one attempted a tourniquet. No one had training. Hannah lost consciousness less than a minute after the attack. Search and rescue arrived 16 minutes later, led by county deputies and wildlife officers. Hannah had no pulse. Massive blood loss had already occurred. Paramedics confirmed death on scene. A coroner report later stated the cause of death as rapid exsanguination due to penetrating trauma to the upper thigh, with secondary injuries to the shoulder and neck. Death would have occurred within 2 to 3 minutes without immediate hemorrhage control. Wildlife officials tracked the cougar using paw prints and radio collar data from a known female in the area. The animal was euthanized later that evening due to demonstrated predatory behavior and close proximity to a popular trail corridor, as relocation was considered unsafe. The incident was briefly reported as a rare wildlife attack. Hannah's family declined interviews and requested removal of online photos. The trail reopened weeks later with additional signage. The rock ledge where the kitten was found remains unmarked, and the hillside appears unchanged, blending naturally into the terrain. It was August 11th, 2013, and Greenland's east coast stretched in an unbroken line of fjords, glaciers, and gravel beaches for over 1,000 miles, virtually uninhabited, except for a handful of Inuit settlements separated by days of travel. Seasonal sea ice distribution had shifted the region's polar bear population along coastal corridors, where they roamed beaches and headlands in search of food. The retreat of pack ice from the coastline left bears moving along exposed shorelines, investigating anything that carried the scent of potential calories. Pelle Moritzen was a 46-year-old outdoor expedition guide from Aalborg, Denmark, whose career centered on solo, unsupported journeys through remote landscapes. He had completed expeditions across Patagonia, Iceland, and northern Scandinavia. His current undertaking was a solo kayaking traverse of Scoresby Sound, the largest fjord system on Earth, covering over 300 miles with no support, no resupply, and no scheduled contact. Moritzen had departed from the settlement of Itokortormit in early August, carrying supplies for approximately 3 weeks. His equipment included a sea kayak, camping gear, food stores, a VHF radio, and a bolt-action rifle chambered for polar bear defense. He had filed a route plan with local authorities and carried a personal locator beacon for emergency activation. The investigation that followed relied entirely entirely on scene reconstruction. What investigators pieced together came from physical evidence at the campsite, the condition of the remains, and Mauritsen's own equipment and logbook. His logbook, recovered from a dry bag inside the tent vestibule, indicated he had made camp on an exposed gravel beach at the mouth of a narrow fjord. The final entry, dated 2 days before the campsite's discovery, noted calm conditions, scattered ice in the fjord, and a bear sighting on a distant headland earlier that afternoon. The entry recorded no immediate concern. Investigators determined that Mauritsen had pitched his tent on open ground approximately 20 meters from the waterline, with his kayak pulled above the tide line nearby. The rifle was found inside the tent, along the interior wall near the sleeping bag. No tripwire perimeter alarm had been deployed, though commercially available systems were recommended equipment for solo Arctic camping. Most critically, his food supplies, including sealed bags of dried meals and energy bars, were stored inside the tent vestibule rather than cached at a distance from the sleeping area, a practice that concentrated food sent directly at the campsite. During seasonal shifts in sea ice distribution, bears traveling coastal corridors investigate any scent suggesting caloric opportunity, including human food stores, cooking residue, and the humans themselves. A bear investigating a tent typically approaches silently, circling the structure before collapsing or tearing the tent before delivering a bite. Onshore winds can carry food sent significant distances along open coastal corridors. Documented Arctic expedition attacks have occurred during night investigations of tents, as the victim is confined, disoriented, and unable to defend effectively. Evidence at the campsite told investigators the sequence with grim clarity. Bear tracks approached the tent from the north, following the beach from the direction of the headland where Mauritsen had noted the earlier sighting. The wind direction that night would have carried scent along the beach corridor toward the approaching bear. The tent had been collapsed from above, the fabric shredded by claws and punctured by teeth, in a pattern consistent with a bear pressing down onto the structure with its full weight. The interior showed signs of violent disruption, with the sleeping bag torn and equipment scattered. The rifle was found unfired, magazine loaded, chamber empty. Investigators concluded that the sudden collapse likely prevented Mauritsen from accessing or operating the weapon in time. Remains were found approximately 90 meters from the campsite, along a drag trail that led up the gravel beach toward a rocky outcrop. Evidence of partial consumption was consistent with documented predatory feeding behavior. The tent, while destroyed, still contained Mauritsen's logbook, radio, and personal locator beacon, none of which had been activated. A group of Inuit hunters from Itokorturmit discovered the campsite 3 days later while traveling along the coast by boat. They identified the damaged tent and the kayak still resting above the tide line and alerted authorities via satellite phone. Danish police and wildlife officials reached the site the following day. Pelle Mauritsen's identity was confirmed through personal effects and dental records. The investigation concluded that a polar bear, possibly the same animal observed by Mauritsen on the headland, had been drawn to the campsite by food scent and attacked the tent during the night. The absent perimeter alarm, the storage of food within the tent, and the rifle's inaccessible position at the moment of attack were cited as critical factors. The bear was never identified or located. Danish authorities reinforced strong recommendations for the use of tripwire alarm systems and proper food caching distances for all expeditions in eastern Greenland. It was October 18th, 2014. The late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the private lodge near Hoedsproet. Jared Van Zyl stood near the grill, beer in hand, about to make a fatal decision. Jared was a 41-year-old IT consultant from Johannesburg, known among colleagues for his habit of correcting others and refusing to defer to expertise he hadn't personally verified. His wife had stayed home with their 2 children. This weekend trip to the bush was meant to be networking, a chance to impress potential clients with his confidence and outdoor knowledge. Jared had arrived 2 days earlier, irritating staff with unsolicited advice on everything from fences to predator behavior. The lodge owner, Willem, learned to nod and move on. Coworkers said his trip was all about proving himself, showing city colleagues he could handle the bush and knowledge he'd never tested. The Braai area, a semi-covered space with wooden benches and a large stone grill, offered savanna views while staying near the lodge. A small wood pile was stacked nearby for the evening, though staff normally keep wood in a locked shed. The Boomslang appeared around 5:30 p.m., a young male roughly 4 feet long with vibrant green scales moving through the low brush behind the brae area. These rear-fanged colubrid snakes grow up to 6 feet in length and possess hemotoxic venom that destroys blood cells and prevents clotting. Unlike vipers with their immediate dramatic symptoms, Boomslang venom works insidiously. Victims may feel nothing for hours while the toxin systematically dismantles their circulatory system. Willem spotted it first and ordered everyone back, moved to fetch the lodge's snake tongs, and radioed for the on-call handler, but Jared kept pressing the point. Willem identified it clearly as a Boomslang and warned the 6 guests present to give it a wide berth. Jared immediately contradicted him, pulling out his phone and insisting it was a harmless green mamba, despite the fact that green mambas are not found in that region. Willem corrected him. Jared argued louder, becoming increasingly belligerent as others sided with Willem. For nearly 20 minutes, Jared debated. He cited websites, mentioned videos, dismissed Willem's 30 years of bush experience. The snake remained motionless, coiled in a low shrub near the woodpile, its posture more like a startled Boomslang than an actively hunting mamba. Other guests moved inside, uncomfortable with the escalating argument and the proximity to the reptile. Willem's wife, Anna, suggested calling a snake handler from town. Jared laughed, said that was dramatic and unnecessary. Then, to prove his point, he approached the shrub. Willem shouted a warning. Jared reached out, attempting the risky, amateur hand grasp he'd seen from videos. The Boomslang, disturbed and defensive, twisted with surprising speed. Jared's grip was poor, his fingers too far back. The snake's head swiveled and it bit down on his wrist before Jared flung it away into the grass. He examined his wrist. 2 small puncture marks, barely bleeding. Jared declared it had not broken skin properly, that there was nothing to worry about. Willem urged him to go immediately to the hospital in Hoedspruit, explaining that Boomslang venom was delayed, but catastrophic. Jared refused, citing the minor appearance of the wound and his lack of pain. He washed his hand at the outdoor sink, wrapped it in a napkin, and returned to drinking. For the next 4 hours, Jared continued socializing, eating grilled meat, drinking 3 more beers. He showed other guests his hand, pointing to the tiny marks as evidence of overreaction. Around 10 p.m., he began to feel nauseous and mentioned a headache. By 11 p.m., small bruises had appeared along his forearm, not from impact, but spontaneously, as blood vessels ruptured beneath his skin. Anna noticed the bruising when Jared reached for water. She insisted he look at his arms. Dark, purple patches spread from wrist to elbow. Jared touched his gums with his tongue and tasted copper. They were bleeding without provocation. His nose began to drip blood. Dizziness made him sit down heavily. Willem called the regional hospital immediately. Around 11:20 p.m., they confirmed what he already knew. The nearest known stock of the specific antivenom was held at a provincial center, several hours' drive away, and provincial logistics meant delivery would take time. An ambulance was dispatched, but would take 90 minutes to reach the remote lodge. Willem urged Jared to stay awake, but Jared, now frightened and pale, insisted on lying down in his room. By 1 a.m., when the ambulance arrived, Jared was semi-conscious. At triage, the medics noted fang marks in the thumb webbing, and later labs showed markedly prolonged clotting times and low fibrinogen, consistent with severe hemotoxic envenomation. By this time, he was semi-conscious with evidence of severe internal bleeding. Clinicians later documented hemorrhage into the head and chest. Paramedics transported him to the hospital, but without antivenom, intervention was futile. Jared Van Zyl was pronounced dead hours later. The lodge owner filed an incident report with local health authorities, emphasizing that the victim had been warned repeatedly and acted against explicit advice. Jared's family received his remains 4 days later, his death certificate listing the cause simply as Boomslang envenomation, accidental but entirely preventable. It was May 14, 2022, at a renowned drive-through safari park in southern Africa, where visitors could observe wildlife from their vehicles along designated routes. The park's vast savanna was home to numerous lion prides, accustomed to tourist vehicles. Clear signage warned visitors to keep windows closed and doors locked at all times, with rangers reinforcing these critical safety rules at the gate. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the grassland as the day's final tour groups moved through the predator sections. Ethan Crow, a 32-year-old software developer on vacation, had entered the park with his passenger, a 29-year-old freelancer known for casual rule-breaking and seeking perfect shots for social media. The freelancer had been encouraging closer encounters throughout their African adventure, dismissing safety protocols as overly cautious. A park warden, a firm 52-year-old ranger with decades of experience, had personally repeated the window rules to every visitor, emphasizing the deadly consequences of exposure. Behind them, a cautious teacher traveling with family had noticed their erratic driving patterns around the animals. The pride they encountered consisted of a dominant male lion with several females resting under an acacia tree, roughly 100 feet from the road. The massive male, weighing over 400 pounds, had been observing vehicles with typical feline indifference. However, the pride's behavior changed as Ethan's vehicle approached and stopped within 16 feet of the resting cats, violating park guidelines and placing them within the lion's strike range. Lions are apex predators perfectly designed for taking down large prey, with males reaching weights of up to 500 pounds and possessing incredible strength and speed. Despite their reputation for laziness, lions can accelerate from rest to 35 miles per hour in seconds when motivated to attack. Their powerful forelimbs are equipped with retractable claws up to 2 inches long, while their massive jaws deliver a bite force exceeding 1,000 pounds per square inch. Male lions are particularly territorial and aggressive, especially when they perceive threats to their pride. Their hunting instincts are triggered by movement, sound, and scent. The fatal sequence began when Ethan lowered his driver's side window to capture better footage of the pride. The sound of the electric window and movement of his hand holding the camera immediately caught the attention of the dominant male. The lion's ears perked forward as he focused on the opening in what had been a sealed barrier. Ethan extended his arm outside the window for a closer angle, unaware his movements were being tracked by one of nature's most efficient predators. The male lion rose from his resting position with fluid grace, moving with deceptive casualness toward the vehicle. Each step brought the 400-pound predator closer to the exposed window, his golden eyes locked on the movement from the car's interior. The lion approached from the driver's side in a direct line, covering the distance in less than 10 seconds. Without warning, the lion reared up on his hind legs, bringing his massive frame to window height. His powerful forepaws gained purchase on the door frame as his claws extended for grip. The lion's enormous head thrust toward the open window, and his jaws clamped down on Ethan's neck and shoulder with devastating force. The initial bite crushed vertebrae and severed major blood vessels, including the carotid artery and jugular vein. The lion's incredible strength allowed him to drag Ethan partially through the window before pulling him completely from the vehicle to the ground. The predator's canine teeth, measuring over 2 inches, penetrated deep into the neck and upper chest, causing massive trauma to vital structures. The bite crushed the trachea and damaged the spinal cord while severing multiple major blood vessels. Once on the ground, the lion executed a controlling bite to Ethan's throat, a technique used to subdue large prey quickly. The powerful jaws maintained crushing pressure, while the lion's forepaws pinned the body to prevent escape. The combination of spinal damage, airway obstruction, and massive blood loss caused rapid unconsciousness. The lion held his position for several minutes, ensuring his prey was completely subdued. The crushing force continued to cause internal damage, while blood flowed from multiple puncture wounds. The attack lasted less than 3 minutes from initial approach to the final moments. Park rangers responded within minutes, but the lion maintained his position over Ethan's body, preventing immediate rescue attempts. Only after rangers used vehicles and noise to drive the lion away could they reach the victim. Emergency medical personnel arrived quickly, but Ethan's injuries were incompatible with life. The combination of spinal trauma, airway damage, and catastrophic blood loss had caused death within minutes of the initial attack. The incident prompted a comprehensive review of park safety protocols and visitor education programs. Enhanced signage and mandatory safety briefings were implemented. Ethan's family released a statement emphasizing the importance of following wildlife safety rules and supporting conservation efforts despite the tragedy. It was August 11, 2017, and New Smyrna Beach stretched along Florida's Atlantic coast under a blazing summer sun that had drawn thousands of spring breakers to its famous shores. The beach, known worldwide as the shark bite capital of the world, buzzed with the energy of college students on vacation. But red warning flags snapped in the ocean breeze, and lifeguard announcements echoed across the sand every few minutes. The water was murky from recent storms, visibility was poor, and marine biologists had reported increased shark activity in the area over the past week. Tyler Brooks had arrived from the University of Georgia with his girlfriend Sarah, ready to spend a week celebrating the end of summer classes before his senior year began. 22, Tyler was known among his fraternity brothers for his willingness to take dangerous dares and his need to prove his fearlessness in any situation. He had spent the day drinking beer on the beach, growing increasingly boisterous and dismissive of the safety warnings that lifeguards had been broadcasting since dawn. Sarah had grown increasingly concerned about Tyler's reckless behavior. He had a pattern of escalating his stunts when he felt his masculinity was being questioned, and the combination of alcohol and peer pressure often led him to make dangerous decisions. That afternoon, as they watched other swimmers staying close to shore due to the shark warnings, Tyler had begun making jokes about the paranoid beachgoers and boasting about his swimming abilities. Bull sharks are among the most dangerous sharks in the world, responsible for more attacks on humans than any other species except great whites. They are aggressive, territorial predators that can grow up to 11 feet long and weigh over 500 pounds. Bull sharks are unique among sharks for their ability to swim in both salt and fresh water, and they often hunt in shallow coastal waters where humans swim. They are ambush predators with incredibly powerful jaws that can exert over 1,300 pounds of pressure per square inch, and their serrated teeth are designed to tear through flesh and bone. As the afternoon wore on and Tyler's alcohol consumption increased, he became fixated on a sandbar visible about 200 yards offshore. Despite the red warning flags and repeated lifeguard announcements about dangerous marine life, Tyler announced his intention to swim out to the sandbar and back. Sarah pleaded with him to reconsider, but Tyler dismissed her concerns and bet her $100 that he could make the swim safely. The lifeguards had specifically warned against swimming to the sandbar, explaining that the murky water and drop-offs around the formation created ideal hunting conditions for sharks. It was approaching dusk, prime feeding time for many shark species, and the recent storms had stirred up the water, reducing visibility to just a few feet. Tyler entered the water despite Sarah's protests and the lifeguards' attempts to stop him. The murky water was warm and choppy, with poor visibility that made it impossible to see more than a few feet in any direction. Tyler began swimming toward the sandbar with strong, confident strokes, unaware that his splashing and movement were creating vibrations that would attract any predators in the area. Halfway to his destination, Tyler encountered the territorial male bull shark that had been hunting in the shallow waters around the sandbar. The 8-foot, 300-pound predator had been attracted by the vibrations of Tyler's swimming. In the murky water, Tyler never saw the shark approaching from below. The attack was swift and devastating. The bull shark struck Tyler's left leg with explosive force, its massive jaws clamping down just above the knee. The shark's serrated teeth sliced through muscle, bone, and major arteries with surgical precision, severing Tyler's femoral artery and causing immediate, massive blood loss. Tyler's scream echoed across the water as the shark's powerful bite crushed his leg bones and tore away large chunks of tissue. The shark released its initial grip and circled for a second attack, drawn by the blood now spreading through the water. Tyler tried desperately to swim toward shore, but his severed leg made movement nearly impossible, and the blood loss was already causing weakness and disorientation. The bull shark struck again, this time targeting Tyler's torso, its jaws clamping down on his ribcage and puncturing vital organs. The second bite was even more devastating than the first. The shark's teeth penetrated Tyler's chest cavity, crushing ribs and tearing through his lungs and heart. Tyler's struggles grew weaker as massive blood loss and internal trauma overwhelmed his system. The water around him turned red as his life ebbed away in the murky depths. Sarah watched in horror from the beach as the water around Tyler turned crimson. Lifeguards launched rescue boats immediately, but by the time they reached the attack site, Tyler had already succumbed to his injuries. His body was recovered and brought to shore, but the massive trauma from the shark bites had been unsurvivable. The investigation revealed that Tyler had ignored multiple safety warnings and entered the water during the most dangerous conditions possible. Tyler's death prompted increased shark safety measures at New Smyrna Beach and served as a tragic reminder of the ocean's hidden dangers. It was October 17, 2014, and the subarctic town of Churchill, Manitoba, sat at the edge of its most dangerous season. Every autumn, polar bears gathered along Hudson Bay's western shore in large numbers, waiting for the sea ice to form so they could return to hunting seals on the pack ice. The concentration of bears near human settlement had earned Churchill the designation of Polar Bear Capital of the World and generated a substantial tourism industry built around vehicle-based bear viewing. Warning signs marked every perimeter access point, advising that polar bears were active beyond town limits and that proceeding on foot was extremely dangerous. A dedicated polar bear alert team patrolled the town boundaries daily, using helicopters, trucks, and cracker shells to keep bears away from populated areas. A holding facility on the outskirts housed bears that ventured too close, relocating them by helicopter once the ice formed. Despite these precautions, the landscape beyond the town perimeter remained among the most dangerous stretches of ground in North America during October and November. Darville Kempe was a 41-year-old freelance wildlife photographer from Bristol, England, whose portfolio emphasized close-range animal portraits. Kempe had traveled to Churchill independently without booking a guided tundra buggy excursion, arriving with professional camera equipment and an intention to capture images on foot that would distinguish his work from vehicle-based photography. As a visiting foreign national, Kempe had not arranged legal firearm documentation or secured any deterrent equipment. While not formally prohibited, authorities strongly advised against traveling beyond the municipal boundary on foot during peak season without a licensed guide, a precaution Kempe had disregarded. He had not rented a flare gun or bear deterrent from any of the local outfitters that offered them during bear season. Records from his accommodation indicated he had departed on foot in the late afternoon, carrying only camera equipment. Kempe was observed by a local resident passing the final bear warning sign at the northern edge of town at approximately 4:30 p.m. The resident would later tell investigators that the photographer had appeared focused on the tundra ahead, walking with purpose directly beyond the marked boundary. Sunset that evening arrived shortly after 6 p.m. and twilight faded rapidly, reducing contrast across the tundra and making distant movement difficult to detect. Months without access to their primary seal prey. Subadult males, typically between 3 and 5 years old, are particularly dangerous during this period. Lacking the size and experience to compete with dominant adults for prime hunting positions once the ice forms, subadults are more likely to investigate unusual stimuli, including humans, as potential food sources. Their predatory behavior is opportunistic, often triggered by a prey item that appears vulnerable, isolated, or unaware. Subadults remain more than capable of delivering a fatal cranial bite. When Kempe failed to return to his accommodation that evening, the owner contacted local authorities. The alert team discovered his body at approximately 7:30 the following morning during a directed search, roughly 300 meters beyond the last warning sign. His camera and tripod were found deployed approximately 10 meters from the point of initial contact, suggesting he had been stationary or moving slowly when approached from behind. Investigators determined the attack had been sudden and overwhelming. Injuries to the head and neck were consistent with a predatory cranial bite. Evidence at the scene indicated repeated forelimb strikes to the upper body after the initial bite. Drag marks extended approximately 40 meters toward a shallow depression in the tundra where the body was found. The bear had partially fed before abandoning the remains, a pattern consistent with the disturbance, possibly the distant sound of the alert team's vehicle during early morning operations. Tracks indicated a single large subadult male. The bear believed responsible was located and destroyed the following day under Provincial Wildlife Authority authorization after being deemed a high-risk predatory animal. The investigation concluded that Kempe had voluntarily passed clearly marked warning signage, entered active polar bear habitat without deterrence or protective equipment, and remained on the tundra past the point where fading light eliminated any possibility of detecting an approaching bear. The coroner ruled the death as misadventure. It was June 10, 2017, the sun already climbing high over the colonial hacienda in Oaxaca, Mexico, where 50 wedding guests gathered in the garden to celebrate. By noon, this event would be transformed into a medical emergency that rural infrastructure was not equipped to handle. Tobias Rivera was 34 years old, the eldest of 3 brothers and fiercely protective of his younger siblings. He worked as a delivery driver in Mexico City, a job that kept him away from family for weeks at a time. His reputation at family gatherings was well established. He drank heavily, usually mezcal, and his behavior became increasingly reckless as the night wore on. His mother often joked, with thinly veiled concern, that Tobias would either fight someone or injure himself before any celebration ended. That morning, Tobias had arrived at the hacienda 3 hours before the ceremony was scheduled to begin. He had already consumed several glasses of mezcal by 10 a.m., greeting relatives with loud embraces and exaggerated stories. His younger brother, the groom, had asked him twice to slow down on the drinking, to no avail. Around 11:30 a.m., as guests milled around the garden waiting for the ceremony to begin, Tobias spotted movement in the shrubs. The snake, approximately 5 feet long, with distinctive brown and tan patterns, had been disturbed by foot traffic and was likely attempting to relocate to quieter territory. The fer de lance, known locally as Barba amarilla, is among the most dangerous snakes in Central America. Adults are typically about 4 to 6 feet long, though very large females can exceed 8 feet, and specimens may weigh up to about 13 pounds. These pit vipers possess hemotoxic venom that attacks blood cells and tissue. A single bite can deliver enough venom to cause catastrophic internal bleeding, with symptoms progressing rapidly. Tobias pointed it out to several bridesmaids standing nearby, laughing at their nervous reactions. One of the hacienda staff, a maid named Rosa, who was refilling water pitchers, saw what he was looking at and immediately warned him to stay away from it. She explained in Spanish that it was extremely dangerous and that he should alert the groundskeeper. Tobias dismissed her concern with a wave, his judgment severely impaired by alcohol. Tobias approached the snake with exaggerated stealth, crouching low and making theatrical gestures to the watching crowd. The snake coiled tighter, raising its head in a defensive posture. He reached down and grabbed the snake behind its head, but his grip was imprecise and likely weakened by intoxication. The fer de lance twisted with surprising strength, its body whipping around his forearm. The strike happened in less than a second. The snake's head jerked forward, and its fangs punctured the back of Tobias's right hand between the thumb and index finger, embedding fully before retracting. The venom, injected deep into muscle tissue, began its work immediately. Tobias's face transformed from drunken amusement to shock. He screamed and flung the snake away, watching it disappear back into the shrubs. Tobias clutched his hand, staring at the 2 puncture wounds. He staggered toward a stone bench where his brother and several guests rushed to support him. The groom held Tobias in a seated position, while his uncle kept the arm immobilized, removed rings and watches, and instructed someone to call for an ambulance. Bystanders were careful not to tighten anything into a tourniquet or cut the skin. The bite site began to swell noticeably. The pain intensified, described by envenomation victims as burning combined with crushing pressure. Dark bruising crept up from his wrist as blood vessels ruptured beneath the surface. He felt dizzy and briefly confused before his speech slurred. Blood began seeping from his gums, a sign that the venom was destroying his blood's ability to clot. By 30 minutes post-bite, Tobias was struggling to remain upright, his breathing shallow and rapid. Rosa called emergency services immediately, but the nearest hospital with antivenin was 56 miles away in Oaxaca City, over rural roads, with a minimum 40-minute response. Tobias's arm swelled to nearly twice its size, skin black and purple, and he vomited blood-tinged fluid onto his white wedding shirt as his blood pressure dropped from accelerating internal hemorrhage. The ambulance arrived 43 minutes after the initial call. Paramedics immediately started an IV line and administered pain medication. During transport, Tobias remained conscious, but increasingly unresponsive. His entire arm had become grotesquely swollen, and bleeding from his mouth and nose indicated widespread vascular damage. He arrived at the hospital approximately 70 minutes after the bite. Medical staff administered polyvalent antivenin, but the delay had allowed extensive tissue damage and internal bleeding to progress. Despite aggressive treatment, Tobias suffered cardiac arrest and died at 1:47 p.m. The wedding was canceled, and most guests departed that afternoon in stunned silence. Tobias's family held a quiet funeral 3 days later in Oaxaca, attended only by immediate relatives. It was March 22, 2017, and the afternoon sun beat down on the Lion Park Wildlife Reserve outside Johannesburg as 34-year-old Pierre Dubois stood at the fence of the lion enclosure, calculating whether he could climb over without being noticed by staff. The French tourist had paid for a standard safari tour, but was frustrated by the distance maintained between visitors and the lions. Pierre had been drinking wine during lunch at the park's restaurant, and his judgment was impaired by both alcohol and his inflated sense of his own capabilities. He'd spent the morning bragging to other tourists about his extensive travel experience and his fearlessness around animals. When the tour guide explained that visitors must remain in vehicles or behind barriers at all times, Pierre rolled his eyes. The lion enclosure housed 6 adult lions, including 2 massive males and 4 females. The pride had been fed earlier in the day and appeared relaxed, lounging in the shade of acacia trees about 50 yards from the viewing fence. African lions are apex predators that can weigh up to 500 pounds and possess the strength to kill buffalo and giraffes. Male lions are particularly dangerous, with powerful jaws capable of delivering crushing bites and claws that can disembowel prey with single swipes. Pierre waited until the tour guide was distracted before approaching a section of fence, partially hidden by dense vegetation. This area had been identified in recent maintenance reports as needing reinforcement, with some fence posts showing signs of wear and providing easier footholds. The fence was 8 feet tall, with warning signs, but the overgrown vegetation had obscured some signage and created a blind spot. Pierre found the compromised section and began climbing, his movements clumsy due to alcohol impairment. The vegetation concealed his actions from staff members. Pierre managed to get over the fence and drop into the enclosure, landing awkwardly and stumbling forward. The sound immediately caught the attention of the nearest lioness, who raised her head and stared directly at him. Pierre froze as he saw the lioness rise to her feet. The other lions also stood, their attention now focused on the human intruder. Pierre began backing toward the fence, his hands raised. The lioness began stalking toward him, her body low to the ground, and her eyes locked onto Pierre with predatory focus. Pierre turned to run for the fence, triggering the chase instinct. The lioness covered the distance in seconds, her powerful legs propelling her forward with explosive speed. She struck Pierre from behind, her weight and momentum driving him face first into the ground. Her front claws raked across Pierre's back and shoulders, tearing through clothing and flesh as she used her weight to pin him down. Pierre screamed and tried to roll away, but the lioness's jaws clamped onto his throat, her powerful bite applying crushing pressure that cut off his air supply. Pierre's struggles became more desperate as he fought for breath, his hands clawing at the lioness's head in a futile attempt to break free. The lioness maintained her suffocating grip on his throat, her canine teeth penetrating deep into the soft tissue, while her body weight kept Pierre pinned. Blood began flowing from the puncture wounds as the bite crushed vital structures in Pierre's neck. The other lions, initially watching from a distance, began moving toward the commotion. As Pierre's struggles weakened, 2 more lionesses approached and joined the attack. Their claws inflicted additional trauma to Pierre's torso and limbs. Pierre's screams had been reduced to gurgling sounds as the initial lioness's grip prevented normal breathing. The attack continued for several minutes as Pierre's body went through its final convulsions. The combination of suffocation from the throat bite, massive blood loss from the claw wounds, and the crushing weight of multiple lions proved fatal. By the time park staff realized what was happening and responded with vehicles and loud noises, Pierre had already died from asphyxiation and blood loss. The entire incident had lasted for 5 minutes. The investigation revealed that Pierre had been legally intoxicated and had ignored multiple warning signs and verbal safety briefings. The lions were not destroyed, as officials determined they had exhibited normal predatory behavior. The park implemented enhanced security measures, including immediate repairs to the compromised fence section, vegetation clearing, taller fences, and increased staff monitoring.